God's absolute will versus God's permissive will. This is what philosophical theologians do to exemplify the differentiations between God's will, because there are different standpoints of God's will. God's will is obviously perfect and pure, but his absolute will is that which is going to ultimately be done. God's absolute will of sending Christ to die on the cross for mankind's sins, that whoever believes in him and repents of their sins will have everlasting life, that is God's absolute will. God's absolute will is that which is congruent with reality. It is that which is continuing on, and what he says will be. That is God's absolute will. Whereas God's permissive will is what is outside of what he wants to happen, but nonetheless he permits certain things to happen, knowing that it is leading all to his absolute will being fulfilled. Obviously, we as human beings, we're fully responsible for the sin and evil we do. When we're tempted, do not say that we are tempted by God, because God cannot be tempted, nor is evil in him. Far be it from the Almighty to do wickedly. We know that from Job and from, I believe it's Corinthians and James. We know that, every good gift comes down from the Father of lights, within whom there is no variation. There is no shadow of change within God. God is who he is, and he remains as he is. And so what God permits, his permissive will, is allowing us as libertarian free will creatures to disobey him, to give way to temptation, to sin and evil. This isn't God's will. He doesn't want us to do these things, but nonetheless he permits them to do so because everything is working out to fulfill his absolute will. God is the only one who can take evil and work it out for a greater good. We know that from Genesis 50:20. So that is the differentiation. Is God's absolute will is that which will be because God has declared it to be, whereas God's permissive will is permitting libertarian free will creatures to disobey him, to cause evil and suffering in this world. But God, being all powerful and having all knowledge, he's able to intervene at appropriate times, but also refrain and allow certain things to be permitted to bring about what he has declared. Because even in the midst of evil, it is only God who can work that out for a greater good and give meaning and purpose behind suffering.